Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. This week, a very soon to become a really good friend because we're practically neighbors on opposite sides of Denver. Janine Bolon is joining us, and man, what an extraordinary person this is. She is. This is. She is. We're gonna have a lot of fun getting to know her, and she's already told us she's going to share a couple little insights from at least one of her books with us. So pay attention and get out your pencil and paper because this is going to be a lot of fun. Janine, thanks for being here today.
I appreciate the invitation. Let's roll with this growth thing, shall we?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you now when we were in the green room, we were chit chatting. Uh, you said something audio blogger, which just I'm loving that title, and I'm thinking I might have to get some business cards that say that. But you've been doing this for a couple of days now. And how have you sustained this? And I'm not going to, well, I will say, you said 1987. Uh, how have you sustained this all this time and this energy level that you carry through?
I think it's because of near-death experiences. That'll kind of send you in a very different direction, and not by choice. I was struck by lightning when I was 10 years old, and people had thought I was dead, and I was just knocked out, kind of in a state of shock. Was not burned, wasn't hurt, nobody around me. And so, after you have situations like that multiple times in your life, you just really learn the fragility of life, but also the
Mhm.
beauty. And so, people talk about my energy levels all the time. And I'm like, yeah, well, the Energizer Bunny got electrocuted at age 10, and I've been going ever since. And so, that's kind of how I set that up. But the other thing is about audio blogging. I got into radio in 1987, and then I started finding out that this internet gig, we didn't have Wi-Fi yet, but I moved into a new platform to where, that was back when you were having to use software packages like freeconferencecall.com and stuff like that to record your interviews and stuff. I didn't have the ability to carry around a microphone without a lot of heavy, heavy equipment. So I was always like, hey, I'll chat with you on the telephone because on radio, we did that all the time. And so as
Mhm.
soon as the software caught up with that. And so I always felt like I was 7 years ahead. I was always 7 years ahead with my vision. It was like when people started to catch up with my party, I knew it had become mainstream. And so I'd move on to what's the next gig? What's the next gig? And so I just kept moving and adapting. And then when this neat little thing called Zoom first appeared around 2007 for me, where I was doing an online university and they offered these conference rooms, I thought, well, this is so totally cool. So I spent a lot of time educating people on it. And then in 2020, everybody joined my party. It was so exciting for all of us in the online course creation community. We were just
Mhm.
thrilled. We were like, oh my gosh, we finally have people they understand, and we don't have to spend the first one or two lessons just teaching them how to use software, that we can get into the content immediately. So I have to say, I'm so excited to be here now and be on your show.
Okay, Camden. Well, you stumped me on that one, Camden. No, that's awesome. Usually Camden and I are really good on our syncing, but not today. Uh, no, so you said 7 years. How do you I mean, I just got to ask, why 7 years? How are you saying 7 years? I mean, if you're measuring it, you have data. What's going on there, Janine? I'm just
Okay.
curious.
All right, I'm an analytical biochemist by training. So I went to college and I got my degree in biochemistry. And the reason I say 7 years is because we were the black sheep of my particular university. The biology department didn't want us. The biology department didn't want us, and the
Mhm.
chemistry department didn't want us. And so we were in the School of Agriculture. And so now biochemistry is a big thing. I mean, all of a
Mhm.
sudden, everybody understands it. And so that's just one of those things that I really started noticing how I seemed to be finding myself at the cutting edge or the leading edge of what was happening as far as science was concerned. So I started really watching how I would adapt to software very quickly. And I embraced automation when back in the day, people were still using stepper motors and saying only if you have industrialized processes should you be using manufacturing. And I was like, we should be using this for method development of compounds. We should, and of course at the time, those sorts of automation would cost anywhere from $1 to $5 million, depending upon what type of thing you were
Mhm.
involved in and how you were trying to integrate the software. So Yes, I have data.
I'm curious on this because talking about it there, and then also with the the radio and podcast element of it. Mentioned it as being on the cutting edge of things. What has that been like? Was there original source from that? Because we talked about where the energy comes from, but you can have a lot of energy and still be in one field for a very long time and not be challenging the status quo as much. Where does that come from with you, Janine?
The fact that people would always meet me at the conferences and they would say, "So, where are you employed this year, Janine?" Because it became a joke to see which company had employed me next, because I wouldn't stay anywhere. The longest I think I ever stayed employed in one place was 18 months. I just got bored. It was one of those things that once I created whatever it needed to be created, automated what never ever needed to be automated, and there were other people there who were very good at maintenance and keeping things running, then I'd move on to the next thing. So I kind of was a serial entrepreneur. And I know that word's getting bandied about a lot, but there was a whole group. I don't think I was the only one. I think there was a whole wave of us in that early time when we were moving out of having to use Ethernet cables and everything, and we moved into Wi-Fi, and then all of a sudden your phone started to look like something out of Star Trek and beyond, right? Now they're flat screens. So I knew there was a whole wave of my generation doing what I was doing. It was just we were in different industries probably.
Well, one of the things I thought was really interesting as I was reading your bio, and you just kind of brought this up also again, is the fact that you were kind of job hopping, if you will. I mean, I went through the same process, but a different justification for it. What made you stop doing that? Working for the man, to work for yourself and do what you're doing now. What was there a catalyst? Was it an event? Did you get struck by lightning again, or what?
Lucky for me, no. I only
Okay.
had struck by lightning once. It was because I was a woman in science. I became pregnant. That was kind of the kicker. They really frowned on having an analytical biochemist who worked with viruses and radiation being pregnant and continuing her job in the employment. And we didn't have maternity leave back when this happened in 1996 for me. And I'm so grateful that it's very different now in the industry. It's wonderful. But I didn't have those options presented to me. It was very binary. It was you either stayed in the job force and we put you in QA or human resources. Basically, everything that you've been trained to do was taken from you, and you were stuffed into a job that was highly regulatory, not a happy place for yours truly or my personality type, or drop out of the workforce and become a stay-at-home mom. So that was really where I was. So I dropped out of the workforce, became a stay-at-home mom, and quickly realized that I was going to go insane if I didn't do something with the little gray cells that were between my ears. And that's when I started creating businesses. I'd build up a business, I'd write books, I'd create software or automation programs, and I'd sell it. And I'd move on to the next one. And doing that while I was doing transcription of software. So, whenever they say, oh, you're voice is being recorded, like whenever you call into a customer service line. Well, I was one of those people that was at home working in 1997 doing the transcription of those customer service calls. So that was back before everything was automated as it is today.
I think the really interesting thing, Janine, is that you kind of touched on this a few different times now is, entrepreneur as a title. And you even said it's kind of overused now. One of the things that we've talked about before on the show with a bunch of different people, Jeff Bosley is one who comes to mind, and he's an actor, as we talked about looking at your life as an entrepreneur, even if you're not, literally an entrepreneur. And I see that that's something that you've really, really harnessed there, where it's, look, I understand who I am. I have this clarity of who I am. And then I'm going to go follow that wherever it's taking me. It might be this job for a while. It might be a different job. I might be bouncing around every 6 months, but it's about kind of like treating yourself as the product and going out there and matching that skill set. So I think it's really amazing that you were able to harness into that. Was that something that was a conscious effort in the beginning, or is this something, because I think with a lot of personality things, you almost like stumble into it. Like you do it for 5 years and you're like, oh my gosh, look at this trend that I can look back on now.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great if I could say, oh yeah, I totally knew what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I got bored. And the other thing was I was inspired by Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy, who are still, Brian Tracy's still running around doing awesome stuff for people. But we were kind of the people like myself, we were kind of the crazy ones because you were supposed to stay in an industry. You were supposed to stay working for the same company. This is what our generation before us educated us on, right? You went to college, you got a degree, you started working for a particular company, and you stayed with them until you retired, get the gold watch, then you're done. This was what the automobile industry had taught us in the rest of that era. And of course, so for us being job hopping, I was always warned that this was a career killer if I did this. But I got too bored. I couldn't stay in just one job because I needed the excitement of learning new things. And so I ended up becoming an academic for a period of time where I taught as an adjunct professor because I just realized I needed to be around where active minds were and where people were wanting to do new things and incredible new processes. And Brian Tracy kind of led that out. He was the first one I had ever heard of in the early 90s that was saying, how many of you are self-employed? That was his question he led with in most of his seminars. And of course, I raised my hand, and I was one of 5 in a room of over 500 who raised their hands that hadn't already been to a previous thing. So it was very unusual to even be an entrepreneur, much less somebody like myself who was a serial entrepreneur. But I did start to meet them more in the late 90s and closer to 2002. Yeah.
One thing on that I think would be a very interesting insight, because, we like to talk about, whether it's in the form of like Green Beret cross training or, learning from other schools of academic thought and transferring the different stuff. Have you been able to try to build that, what you were talking about there with academia into business and or into your businesses as far as being around people who want to learn and kind of having that growth mindset? Because that's something that's really great about academia. There's some other things that aren't as great and why people stay away from it sometimes and go into business. Have you been able to harness that into any of your businesses in a cultural way?
Right. You bet. You tapped into it perfectly. So around 2010, 2011, I started my online university. Why? I had 3 requirements. I was done dealing with grades. I despised having to grade students. I thought it was a waste of my time. Definitely thought it was a waste of their time. However, in order for a lot of universities to stay accredited, it's required, unfortunately. So, I was just like, these people are adults. They either understand what I'm saying or they don't. I don't think they should be tested except for their own education. Like you use tools of testing as an educational device on top of everything else that you're using. So that was step 1. Number 2, I was done dealing with administration, talking to me about what I could and could not do in the classroom, especially when my students were doing so well. I was gifted a lot of the trouble students. They were labeled as ADHD or HDD or what have you. I mean, there was more acronyms than I had understanding of. And so I would turn to this people. And what I realized is we had this wave of students coming into university that were highly energized, highly engaged, and they were bored. And that was their problem. And so as soon as I upped, not the workload, as soon as I upped the engagement level, I allowed them to have headsets on with one ear exposed and walk around the class campuses and stuff. I realized, oh my gosh, these kids are knowing what they're doing. They helped me with number 3, which was I only want to deal with students who want to be there. And so,
I'm sorry. I'm laughing so much because I love that so much, because this is me with rugby as a coach. Like I never want the kid who has to go play a sport coming out to mine. I got a few like that, but it's always like, look, you got to want to be here. If you want to go sit down over there, go sit down over there. Like everyone out here should want to be here so we can actually engage with each other, because otherwise the interactions are meaningless.
I totally agree. And so those were my 3 requirements. So I started building an online course, and it was very cumbersome, very laborious. And I look at what you can do now with an online course versus what I was trying to build. And all I can say is thank goodness. I'm so grateful, because nobody should have to go through what I went through to build an online course system. But that's what I've done and how I've made my business, is that I write books on topics. I have different websites depending upon what interest level, because I write in 4 different genres. And then I have online courses that add to that. So that's how I took the university system and totally bent it with the force of my will into what I wanted to do and how I wanted to react with students. And what's been amazing is I currently have 441 students signed on, and we're running through 15 different online courses now, and everybody is a lot happier, let me tell you.
What's feeding that creativity? You know, that because what you describe is kind of that trend of I really get curious about something and I'll do it for a while and I'll become satisfied. It's kind of what
Mhm.
I'm here. Become satisfied with my knowledge, but then I've got to go somewhere else. How are you doing that and not just like those 400 students saying, "Hey, see y'all later," because I got something else I'm chasing now. Because
Right.
I know you're not doing that, but so I'm curious how are you keeping that flow going, that creativity and that excitement of something shiny and new?
Well, I don't know about you guys, but this is a huge freaking planet. Have you ever looked at it? It's huge.
I
Am
did the
I?
other day, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that I was one of those kids that was always looking up at the stars. Okay. I was always wanting to see what was over the next hill. I always
Mhm.
was curious. And that's the thing that some people have to bury due to life experience. I think we all are just kids that are constantly learning. But if you have enough experiences or situations that slap your hand, some people just kind
Mhm.
of say, okay, and they set up boundaries of self protection totally understandably, and then they don't have that in the industry they like to call it the beginner's mind, right? You know, you have to
Mhm.
have an empty cup and all these metaphors. I mean, oh my gosh, we have thousands of metaphors about what type of students we would love to have. However, from the student perspective, if you're not excited about something, as I say to them, don't do it. And then and
Mhm.
people are like, but how do I make rent? And I think this comes back to your growth. We think that in order for us to be successful in whatever type of life we're leading, that we have to be able to chase the money first. And what I encourage people to do is figure out what lifestyle you want. Now, when people really sit down and analyze that, you do not hear about what you see on your Facebook ads or your Facebook feed, where you have some guy standing outside and there's a beautiful private jet and he's got the sexy blonde and the red dress and the motorcycle in the
Mhm.
background and all that. Speaking for the guys, for the women, lots of jewelry is dripping. You know, there's these stereotypes, right?
Mhm.
And with these stereotypes, they're feeding into that. This is what you should want so you can label yourself as successful. To which
Mhm.
I turn to them and I go, that's a bunch of malarkey. You and I both know it, but we buy into that crap subconsciously. So don't. Try to stop that. If you want to truly grow, you have to define for yourself what your personal vision of success is. So when I look at myself in the mirror or I'm talking to folks like yourself, I know myself to be a highly successful, highly prosperous individual. Can I tell you that I have $10 million in revenue with my business? Absolutely not. I'm a freaking online university course creator. Are you kidding me? I
Mhm.
can't flash you and say, oh, look at me, I'm so successful, because my lifestyle may not be anywhere close to what you want. So that's
Mhm.
why it's so important for your own personal growth. You got to decide, what does that lifestyle really look like? You know what mine looked like? I wanted to own my own home. I wanted to own everything I use. All right. So if I'm using it, I want to own it. I don't want debt free. I want to live totally debt free. And then I want to have a garden and I want to have a library in my house. These all are very attainable things. Guess what? You don't see a private jet or a helicopter or a New York, a Manhattan studio anywhere in all of that.
Mhm.
So that gives me a lot of personal freedom. And so once I started really examining what kind of lifestyle I wanted, that's when the growth really took off for me and the ideas. And so that's where the ideas and the creativity come from,
Mhm.
because I have a very structured life in that I have an exact idea of where I want to go. I have a super strong vision, like you guys talk about with your clarity. You know, you have
Mhm.
super strong vision, and I'm going to go make that happen. And I am excited about the adventure along the way. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, I think the interesting thing there is you use the word structure, and but also you're talking about moving around and changing on so many different aspects of it. But I think there's so much truth to that, because when you really stop and think about it, you have like your life categories, whatever other term you want to use for it, and then inside those categories, things change all the time. Like you still have this vision of who you want to be, but that 25% of your day or 50% of your day that's your job, that can change a little bit every now and then, because you still want to be something that excites you as you're moving forward. So I think that's a really important takeaway, that you can have structure while still being flexible inside of things.
And the other word, creative, right? Because that's something that Otis was bringing up, is like, okay, where does the creativity come from, Janine? It's because I have a very structured life, but I'm happy with that structure because I'm the one that built it, right? I totally built this structure for myself. Nobody imposed it
Mhm.
upon me. All right. And so then the other fun thing is highly creative. Why? Because from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. every morning, I have 2 hours where I'm doing nothing but thinking and deciding what is the next cool, shiny, fun loving thing I'm going to build next. And
Mhm.
maybe people will want to buy it, maybe they won't. I've failed epically. I've had some projects that I thought were the cat's meow and nobody agreed. And how do I know that? No one voted with their dollar, right?
Mhm.
They didn't want it at all. That's okay. I had a blast building it and I learned a lot from that. And then I'd go on and build the next thing. So this whole thing is about creativity and structure. And a lot of my creatives, and I have students all the time that want to give a pushback and say, hey, structure doesn't really work for me, blah, blah, blah. It's got a bad name, discipline, right? And I said, look,
Mhm.
you need to remember that discipline is not just an external force that's being put upon you. It's also that internal force of you know exactly what you want. You want to be an artist. You keep saying you don't have time. Well, you have the same amount of time that Benjamin Franklin did. So how are you using your time? And then people get all caught up in time management, and I go like, stop. What life do you want for yourself? And when
Mhm.
you really start listening to that, I had one student move to France. She only wants to be a waitress. She has absolutely no interest in being anything more because she wants to be a waitress. And why did she move to France? Because then she gets health care because of the way their system is set up. And she can visit those Renaissance museums and learn from the masters to be the type of painter she wants to be. So there you go. It really frees you up. You have a freedom that most people find very envious when you know what your vision is for yourself.
That's really amazing. I love that story about the former, I guess, former students, what you would call her. Uh, and one of the things that I was, man, there's like six different things, but I'll just pick it, one of them. But it is because I get this from clients also, clients, friends, associates, wherever, the whole gambit of, well, that's all well and good for you. How do I do that? Because you did a really good job of how you discovered it, and I do the same thing for people. Hey, this is how I discovered it. But how do you help that other person, friend, client, whatever, discover that lifestyle that they enjoy?
Well, that depends on their mental health, right? Where are they mentally? And where are they emotionally? So I say mental health first, and that's basically because I work with so many men. So I was talking about, let's talk about your mental health, to which they get very defensive up front. And I said, okay, we either talk about your mental health or we start talking about your emotions. They're like, mental health. I said, thank you, let's stay there.
Yeah,
That
that would
is.
be yep, right there.
Oh, whoa, 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 wait. That is such a good rebrand. Was that a conscious effort? Who put that together? Because oh my gosh, like that is effective. I never thought about it that way.
When I work with women, I say, let's talk about your mental health. They're like, no. And I say, all right, let's talk about your emotions. No problem. So don't worry, I'll find a way to get in. I've been a teacher for over 30 years, and I've worked with men, I've worked with women, I've worked with they, them individuals, non binary. And so, one of the things that I like to share with no matter who the person is, it's like you have a passion and zest for life, you've just forgotten.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's not so much about finding your purpose, although that is a good way to go. But for those people who are like, oh my God, if you start talking to me about goal setting, time management, and finding my purpose, I will run kicking and screaming and hair on fire away from you, Janine. And I'm like, I get it, no problem. So how do you want to talk about this? Well, I really want to know what makes me happy because I don't know. I'm like, that's why we have to
Mhm.
talk about your emotions or we have to talk about your mental health because happiness, as you know, is not the end goal. You're never going to be happy unless you're moving toward a target that you are thrilled by. Okay. And most people feel like they are trapped. Most people do not feel free. So we talk about, are you living debt free? Are you moving toward a big goal that you're excited by? When was the last time you sang, danced,
Mhm.
did art, wrote your journal? You see where I'm going with that? Our society, as an American woman, let me tell you something. We talk a good game about the arts and we don't behave very well when it comes to dancing and enjoying ourselves and learning how
Mhm.
to be excited by the fact that your tulip just finally decided to bloom after a very long winter.
I'm just laughing with that because it's just so true. I mean, in that aspect of, you have to decide, and you have to be truthful to yourself.
Mhm.
That's a huge step, and I think that, you know, without diving into this too much, but I think that could be one of the biggest blocks that people have is they're afraid of being truthful to their true self, and realizing that, and because they're so concerned about everybody else and everything else
Yeah.
around them that
Mhm.
they never want to satisfy themselves. So
Right.
that
Because
that
that's what
that's
they were taught.
yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what they were taught. And so I don't like to bust on people. I'm like, dude, I don't know what you have walked through. I said, and it's really none of my business. But where you are standing right now, how's that working for you? That's usually where I start off with. And I'm like, when was the last time you danced? When was the last time you sang? What are you eating? Who do you live with? There's 5 questions that we ask as a mental health professionals have trained me. And I had to ask for that because when I started teaching people about debt-free living, I kept running into mental health issues. And I was trained as an analytical biochemist, robots, automation, not human resources. Are you kidding me? But I ended up having to totally retrain and rebrand myself in that way because when you start dealing with money, guess what? It's emotional. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and one of the things I really wanted to touch on, because we kind of alluded to it earlier, and I guess Camden will come back from Tucson here in a little bit, but is your business connections and how you help businesses achieve the success, and you mentioned the 4 hour plan, I think is what you
Mm.
how you referred to it, and I'd really just get some tidbits to, how can our listeners, our business leaders that are out there, take some notes and maybe execute that for growth in their business, that 4 hour plan.
Okay, so get your notebook out. And if you're listening to this and you're jogging or exercising, you may want to bookmark it because here we go. 4 hours a week is devoted to nothing but growth. So when I first started, now just to give you a little background, I have run 15 businesses and I have sold 11 for a profit. So I just wanted to let you know that this 4 hour a week system is based on just how to grow your business. Now, when I first started in business, people would talk to me all the time about you need to work in your business, not on, or you need to work on your business, not in your business. Sorry.
Hmm.
You need to work on your business, not in your business. For 15 years, I said, what are you talking about? Nobody could tell me. Okay, nobody could tell me. And I was like, what is it that you're saying to me when you say this? And nobody could define it in a way that my brain could understand. Finally, around business number 9 or 10, I finally figured it out. Oh, what they're talking about of working on your business, oh, is growth.
Hmm.
That's all it is. Well, I didn't know. I love it that you guys know, but I didn't at the time. I was an ignoramus. I didn't know. And so finally I said, okay, well, if I'm going to do growth, then I have to devote some time to it. 4 hours a week. Here you go. First one, spend an hour prospecting. We'll come back to these. Spend an hour doing follow-up. Spend an hour doing connection. Spend an hour, and this is the one everybody likes to forget, training yourself. Because I know you don't know it all. As much as I would like to claim that, I thought that, spiritually, if I ever got enlightenment, I would know everything. Guess what? Not even God knows everything. We'll talk about that later. That's a spiritual topic. Let's stay to business. But everybody needs to continue to train themselves. Spend an hour a week doing that, whether it's reading a business book or learning a new piece of software or building your next course. Whatever it is, you need to be training yourself on something new. So 4 hours a week. An hour prospecting. This is right out of Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, and every other big time salesperson you've ever met in your life. If you are not on the phone talking to people, you are not growing. Zoom is an equivalent. That's okay. But are you being but are you being proactive? Are you contacting these people? Are you reaching out? Do you spend an hour a week where you do nothing but say, who have I not chatted with recently? And I need to catch up. Last time I talked to John Smith, Jane was headed in for surgery because she had something wrong with her knee. What are we doing? What's happening? Then you also spend an hour a week doing follow-up. Now, follow-up is you hear this all the time, the fortunes in the follow-up. They've got beautiful alliteration and idea. Well, are you doing this? if you're not following up, if you don't have systems in place, if you do not have some sort of either software to remind you, or you have a virtual assistant whose primary job is to help remind you to follow up, and you don't have special software that reminds you you need to follow up on an email because they haven't gotten back to you in 3 months. If you don't have these type of systems in place, you are not doing appropriate follow-up so that you can live that lifestyle you want for yourself, right? So that's the first 2 hours, prospecting and follow-up. The third one is connection. Be a part of some sort of networking group. Now, after 2020 and the big reboot in the sky that the entire planet of Earth was able to have, everybody has a networking group. Well, pick one. All right. And hang with them until you have learned and have met everybody on that call. And when you have had 3 networking sessions and it's the same people and nobody new comes on, pick a different one. Keep connecting with new people. And what you eventually want to do is form a referral network. This is not official. This is people like Otis, who happened to run into me from another networking group and had, hey, Janine, want to come on the show? And I'm like, you bet, I would love to. So that's what you want, is you want to build a referral network where people know what you do so that you can start referring back and forth. If you want to make it more official, that's fine. But that's the third hour, which is connection. And that is different from prospecting and follow-up. How? Because with connection, you're not worried about how it's going to work out for you.
Mm-hmm.
You're just serving. You're being that servant leader that everybody talks about. All right, let's talk about the fourth hour that everybody likes to ignore. And that is, pick a Friday, if Friday's the best for you, or maybe it's a Monday, it depends on your business. But you're going to pick an hour a week where all you're doing is reading that next business book, or you are answering a question that's been niggling at you, or you spend an hour Googling, how do I build an online directory, or whatever your thing is, what is your main stumbling block with your business. For me, I like to spend that hour reading about something that has nothing to do with business, because I do business so much that usually I read for an hour of a fiction book. Like, I don't know, science fiction is my favorite. So I am like reading stuff that has nothing to do with business. Why? Because that inspires and feeds the creative soul that I have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's your 4-hour-a-week system for growth.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So prospect, follow up, connection, and education, right? All right there. And you know, there's so much truth to that. I love the way you broke those down. You know, there's some other, you know, I have a friend of mine that says, you know, take a big swing every week, take an hour of your day, which kind of fits into this also in that prospecting, you know, take that shot, you know, swing for the fences at least once a week for an hour, you know, write that letter to, you know, the president of Nabisco so that you can, you know, the worst that can happen is what? They say no, right? I mean, you know, in that same sort of sense, because those are in his principle of that, take that big shot is that if that does happen, you know, that's a significant, you know, that's like a 1,000% increase in your business sort of thing, you know, is one of those sort of things, which is really kind of fun. And then I love yours for doing it every week, because if you start to do the math, I mean, real quick math, and you say, if you're going to do these 4 hours every week, that's 208 hours a year that you are back in your business, focusing on your business's growth with a schedule of things to do, right? Because what do I mean, as much as people say they don't like structure, and I wish I could remember, sorry, I got on a real diatribe here, but I remember a guy, I think it may have even been a Jordan Peterson sort of outtake. It sounds like something he would say, where the students said, well, I don't like structure and I don't want to do anything structured. He's like, well, but you're here in this class right now and you adhere to a days of calendars. Aren't those structures? Do you not believe in days of the week? Do you not believe in a watch? And you know, it's kind of that we've all got structure. And truthfully, we all crave some sort of structure because it makes it easier for us. And wow, I don't know where I was going.
Well,
yeah,
I
bring
was
me
just gonna
back
say
around, Ken. Bring me back around.
I think you're right on that all people crave structure. And I think that if for a lot of people who are in the business of rejecting that structure, it is more of a lack of desire to create their own and to take the time to take control of their life and build into it. Because that's when you start talking about growth, it is really just taking control of your life, accepting that, look, This is me. I'm in charge of this. If I'm going to go somewhere, it's going to be up to me. It's not up to anyone else. And I've got to take the time to, work on these sets of things to start growing. And I think when you start talking about structure, the best things about structure are, well, one, I think structure is necessary for growth. You want to have your own structure, something that works for you, but you need to have some sort of structure to build up on. There's any number of analogies that are coming to my mind right now of buildings and plants and all these different things that grow up, but you have to have the structure in order to build up. But it's entirely true when you think about learning in general. I mean, Janine, I'm sure you can jump in on this with your academia experience.
I think the biggest thing is we're going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to circle us back around to our business owner, because I really want to help the person that's listening right now. And that is, I have been working this system for years, but I didn't really start watching it exclusively until I hit 2020, because when I started sharing this more and more with people and writing the book on it, people were like, it doesn't work. So I started, typical Janine, I'll show you my data. And I became very transparent very quickly. And I had a group of people that signed up with me every Saturday. They would watch my numbers. And I am currently, just in the last 6 months, I went from having 289 people in this particular pool of people to now I'm over 700, just using the 4-hour-a-week system and asking for people's addresses so I could send them a card. Okay. And that was what I said. I said, I'm going to ask for addresses. I'm going to show you this 4-hour-a-week system, how you follow up with people, blah, blah, blah. And people were just like, wow. And so with the 4-hour-a-week system, that will help you as a solopreneur. Now, if you're an entrepreneur and you have multiple employees or teams, then you have a 5-hour-a-week system. And that 5th hour is training your team. These are not team meetings. You're training yourself, and then you're training your team. And what you're doing is you're training them on your systems and the systems that you have and seeing how that works. And so we can get into that later. But I just wanted to let your listener know that this is how it helps you. And I have data to back it up. And if they want to reach out to me, I'll be glad to show them my numbers. Because you hear this all the time, right? You need to be authentic. You need to be authentic. And I like to take that word authentic and go transparent. I'm very clear when I say to somebody, look, I'm a business owner and I want you to buy my stuff. Okay. But this call is about how I can work with you and we can be launch partners. This is not about you and I buying my stuff or your stuff. Okay. So you have to be, I think, transparent. I like the word transparent over authenticity, because a lot of people, as you know, don't really know what they want yet. And until they know what they want, it's really hard to be authentic.
That's very wise. Well, one question I kind of wanted to bring back around on just kind of interesting one to wrap up on here. So, we've talked through a bunch of different experiences that you've had in as an entrepreneur in academia, pharmaceuticals, all these sort of different things. I'm curious, being on the cutting edge of things, then you've talked about how in 2020, the connectivity and the online resources and all that kind of stuff just took off. So I just want to get your hot take on where's that going in the next, 3-5 years or so? How strong do you think these trends are, or are people going to go back to how they were 2 years ago?
No way to go back to where we were 2 years ago. Are you kidding me? Even the banks allow me to do, dare I say, electronic deposits online. They let me take a picture and send the picture of the check in, and they consider that a deposit now. Can you imagine anytime, be honest, in 2019, where you would have thought that would have happened with your banking institution? I dare you to say yes, because, all right, so who the heck knows is the honest answer to your question. However, my hope is that the throttle hold that our economy has on working from home will cease. I already see it happening. And I also see where there is a loss of control of the workforce, and I watch these larger corporations panicking, because now all of a sudden I can't control that person to only work for me. They may be moonlighting in 3 different other areas, and all of a sudden I see this fragmentation of the workforce. So where is it leading? I don't know. I'm not in enough of a crow's nest to be able to see the whole economy, but what I can say is I'm exceedingly excited, and I have never been happier to be alive to see what the next generation, so I'm not talking about our millennials, I'm talking about those younger guys that are like just now starting to look at college and going, not thinking I want to stay on a screen learning another thing. You know, all of a sudden, our educational institutions, our banking institutions, and our intellectual property, anything is changing. And we see a lot of entrepreneurs starting to come out of that. And this gives me a lot of hope. Why? Because Thomas Jefferson talked about as long as America had two things, we would stay in a growth mode and we would survive. Number one, we had to have farmers. As long as we stayed a strong agricultural nation and were able to feed ourselves from our land, we would be okay. The second thing was entrepreneurs. And I see a bucket load of those babies hitting the marketplace. Over the last year, consultants have just gone up. Have you seen it on LinkedIn, or am I the only one going, oh my God, there used to be like 38,000 of us in this industry. There are now 238,000 of us in this industry. And so I've been watching that kind of expansion. So that's my little bird's eye view, but realize I'm not in the big crow's nest. I'm just looking at it from my area.
No, I love that. You got to have the honest answer, as well as, you got to have a little bit of fun with it too.
Well, and I'll agree with you, especially in the industry with businesses. I find it really interesting. And it's a telltale sign of where those business leaders, and I'm using the quotes leaders because they needed a little bit of work on themselves as leaders, because when you don't trust your team, because now I can't walk down the hall and see that they're at least sitting at their computer and I can hear the keyboard, and that sort of sense. But when they're at home, how do I know they're actually doing something? And that's a whole nother way of having to lead your organization. You've got to do a mind shift. You've got to lay things out and allow them to operate and let them run. And I think that's where a lot of businesses are struggling. And it's not just well, gosh darn it, I've been paying rent on this building for 5 years, and we've got 5 more years on this lease. We're going to fill it up with people. I mean, I've been told a couple of businesses that's their decision criteria for going back into the office. Oh, by the way,
kind of creepy, huh? You need a body. You need a body to fill space, and I kind of go. So does an undertaker in a cemetery. But do you want to be that person? Yeah.
Well, I think it's an interesting way of looking at things. What is your business looking at as far as like the metrics you're measuring your success with? Is like, okay, is there an outcome that we're working towards, or do we need 160 hours of people being at their computer? Like, which one are we getting after here? And really having that honest look at it, because that's one of the things I think I've seen it with a lot of people my age, with a bunch of different companies, where it's like they're working full-time jobs with no hourly schedule anymore, and working from home or from the office, and like all these type of flexible things, because it's getting to the point where it's like, look, we're about outcomes are what actually matters. Anyone who's been in business for a while should understand that. But I think that the pandemic has kind of flipped that on its head, to where so many of these old metrics, when you talk about like the old school ways of managing things and trying to get those marginal improvements by making sure that they're working at this machine for X amount of hours before they go do something else, like all that kind of stuff that I think is getting thrown out to a large extent because of those changes. So I think it's super interesting, but the wisdom there is to look for the outcomes rather than focusing on some sort of input metric, which actually doesn't have anything to do with it.
Touche.
Awesome. Well, Janine, this has been great, and to round us out on our traditional how we close out our show and what you learn. I'd love for you to go first. I usually don't let the guests go first for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe so that you can have time to prepare. But I'm curious, what'd you learn today?
What I have learned, and I'm not going to just pigeonhole it into today, but overall, is the fact that if I want a lifestyle, there is something in the universe that will make sure I can have that lifestyle, and all I have to do is be patient for people to catch up with me. So over and over, I was wanting certain things because of my lifestyle. I had 4 small children under the age of 7. I was homeschooling them. but I needed more. That was not enough to keep me engaged and keep my gray cells growing. So what did I do? I started online businesses, and I didn't want to be just a purveyor of goods. So that's why eBay wouldn't work and all that. Other people have had tremendous success, but I knew I was after a very specific way of engagement with people. And as I told you before, minds that were learning things and growing was what I wanted to be around. And so you go after that lifestyle and then just know that the money will follow. However, don't jump ship right off the bat. Some people like to just jump into it 100% before they've tested things. I am very cautious. I am not a gambler. I really mitigate all the risk I possibly can because, number one, I will not lose the mortgage payment on my business. So that's kind of what I learned today, is that any lifestyle is possible as long as you do quite a bit of testing to make sure that it's a go-to.
That's great. Thanks for that, and thanks for sharing that with us too. And I'm going to go with the easy, obvious one, and it is the 4 hours, or really the 5 hours, to focus on your business in a week. And that's such a great, simple tool that I think anybody can very quickly implement it. I mean, and just to reemphasize those again: prospect, follow up, connection, education, and then when you have a team, train your team. And man, you'll be amazed. I mean, just thinking that through, you'll be amazed at the growth and success that you'll create for your business just by implementing that really simple thing. So thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Camden, what'd you learn?
Just gonna say on that, we use the sports analogies all the time. Like, could you imagine having a player on your rugby team that wasn't getting any better? Like literally, you weren't going to do anything to make them a better player. Like, it's such a ridiculous concept. So I just thought that was an interesting observation there. But no, I've learned a lot today. I think it's been really great. But the one thing that I wanted to latch on to is right there at the end, because I'm amazed I hadn't heard this before, which was what you said from Thomas Jefferson, that America will continue to grow and be successful if we always have farmers and entrepreneurs. So as somebody who has an ag biz background and entrepreneurial background, I love that quote, and I needed to get it repeated for us.
You need to get that one hanging up on your door. That's what you need to
shoot, get it tattooed on my forehead. Come on.
There you go. Janine, how can folks get more from you, touch base with you, learn, buy your books, all those sort of things, and maybe even bring you in to help them implement those 5 hours each week?
Well, I'd like to offer your listeners a free book, and they can get it by going to my personal website, which is JanineBolon.com. It's spelled JANINE, B as in boy, OLON as in Nancy.com, and just go to books and scroll down, and it'll say get my free book, and you will be signing up for my newsletter, and you will only hear from me maybe once or twice a month after the initial 4 or 5 welcome emails. You only hear from me once or twice a month because I don't like to invade you like some folks do, and I do that also because I figure you'll want to reach out to me next after you receive those emails. So that's how they can get a hold of me.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And Cam, we'll be sure to put that in our notes just for folks to learn how to spell your name, because if you're like me and you're driving down the road listening, you're like, what was that again? So just it'll be in the show notes, or you can just listen to the whole show again and again and again until you get her name down and that URL. Either method works. So Janine, thanks again for your time today, man. It has been so much fun talking with you and learning from you. So we really appreciate that. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our guest, Janine Bolon, and our sponsors, Tribe and Purpose. Find your purpose, find your tribe. You can check out recent episodes of The Cam and Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out a full archive at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. The Cam and Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next week.